In this video, we're going to discuss ammunition for the United States 69 caliber smoothbore muskets. The United States produced its first military smoothbore flintlock in 1795. The pattern to produce these cartridges came from the 1840 U.S. Ordnance Manual. It's also shown in the 1850 and later editions as well. It probably was used in similar configurations prior to that. So the cartridges we're going to discuss are a round ball, a buck and ball, and a buckshot cartridge. To get started, you're going to need paper. What I like to use is this brown paper that's sold by the roll at most big box home improvement stores. It has the consistency of newsprint, and it's just a plain brown paper that's consistent with surviving examples. So to get started, the first thing you have to do is cut some cartridge pieces out. And to do that, you're going to need a template. The buck and ball and the round ball cartridges used the same piece of paper, or the same size of piece of paper, whereas the buckshot cartridge had a different size, a larger envelope. So to get started, you're going to need a sharp razor knife, and we're going to cut out a cartridge piece using the template. Just want to make sure to keep your fingers out of the way. And there we have a piece of paper that's suitable for round ball or buck and ball. And then we'll cut one out for the buckshot cartridge. And of course, I'm cutting these out one at a time, but it would be just as easy to fold the paper numerous times and cut out multiples. And that way you can really crank out a bunch of them at once. And so that is a buckshot cartridge. So the next step is to roll the cartridges into their proper form. And to do that, you're going to need a choking board. And so I've made up a choking board here. It's just a scrap piece of wood that's got a dowel in it and a piece of string tied to it and another small dowel that I can pull on. And that's called the choking cord. And then I've got another little station here, another little dowel that holds my ball of or spool of thread. And this is linen, 3-ply linen thread, similar to what would have been used in period. So we'll start with a round ball cartridge. So to make a round ball cartridge, you're going to take your paper that you cut using the round ball template or the dimensions from the Ordnance Manual, and you're going to take a former that's 69.69 inches in diameter, 69 caliber, and you're going to lay it on the cartridge paper so that the nose of the former is pointing at the long end of the trapezoid. And then we're just going to roll it up. And it makes it easy if you eyeball this, from your perspective, your eyes. If you just line up the edge of the paper with the edge of the cylinder of the mandrel, you can very easily and accurately tell if you're lined up properly on the mandrel. So then you can see the mandrel is recessed down in the end of the cartridge. Then we move over to our choking cord, and you're going to wrap the cord around the nose or the end of the cartridge here, about where the end of the mandrel would be. You're going to put your finger over the end of the cartridge and then just pull the string tight. And that produces a flower looking thing on the end of your cartridge. So then you're going to take your string, the loose end, the free end from your spool. I'm going to wrap it one time around the end of the cartridge and pull it tight, as tight as you can without breaking your cord. And then you're going to secure it with 2 half hitches. And at this point, we're going to cut the free end only. The Ordnance Manual is very specific about this in that you don't cut the cord until you've finished construction of the cartridge. So our cartridge string is still attached to the spool. So that's going to have some ramifications for how we tie off the different compartments as we produce the different kinds of cartridge. So since this cartridge is just a round ball, we've already got a nice hemispherical end. We'll withdraw the mandrel and we'll take a 0.65 diameter round ball, down the cartridge it goes, and then we'll take the blunt end of the mandrel and position it inside the cartridge again to hold the round ball in place. Next, we need to tie off the round ball. And to do that, you simply make a loop like so, and then loop your loop like so. Then you flip the loop over, you come down the cartridge to where the end of the ball is, you pull that nice and tight, and it self-cinches itself and compartmentalizes the round ball. At this point, it's been secured with 2 half hitches, so you can cut the end of the string. And by waiting until the end to cut the string, there's no waste. We get to see the end of the cartridge string is the only little piece that we had to waste because we had to hold on to that to do the tying. So that is the round ball 69 caliber cartridge. To complete it, it just needs to be charged. Now, for flintlock muskets, this would have 130 grains of musket powder. For percussion muskets, that was reduced to 110 grains of musket powder. The reason for the difference is the flintlock muskets, some of the powder had to be used to prime the pan, whereas percussion muskets didn't require that. So to finish the cartridge, we'll just pinch the body of the cartridge until we find the level of the gunpowder, and then we crease the sides of the tail, fold the tail over like so, and then fold the tail in towards the center of itself, and crease them with your thumbnail. Fold the tail back across the top of the cartridge, then down along the body of the cartridge. And then I like to give it a pinch here, and that just helps the tail keep its form. And of course, these would have been bundled up into packages of cartridges, which would secure the tail until the cartridge package was opened and they were ready for use and put in a cartridge box. But that is a 69 caliber round ball US cartridge. Next, we'll do buck and ball. Buck and ball used the same cartridge template as round ball. So just like before, we position our mandrel. We leave about a ½ inch of gap here between the end of the mandrel and the end of the cartridge paper. We line up the edges and we do a roll. And again, as before, we're going to choke the end of the cartridge. Put your finger over the end of the cartridge, pull it tight until you crimp the end of the cartridge and produce your little flower. Next, you take the free end of your spool of thread, we wrap around one time, pull it tight, and then we're going to secure with 2 half hitches. At this point, you can cut the free end of the string. But as before, we're still attached to our spool. We haven't cut the cord yet. So next, I like to put the blunt end back in and flatten this up a little bit because you're going to have buckshot sitting in there. So the next step is to charge it with the load with the bullets. And so I'm using 0.31 diameter round ball buckshot. I think the manual calls for 0.3, but this is close enough. So now we've got the buckshot, and then we drop in our 0.65 diameter round ball. Then to keep them in place while we tie the cartridge, put the mandrel back in, blunt end first, and now we've trapped the bullets in the end of the cartridge. So the next step is to use our twine to compartmentalize the buckshot from the round ball from the powder chamber. So to make the first compartmentalization for the buckshot, we're going to form a single loop and then just come over the end of the cartridge to where the buckshot ends approximately, and just pull that good and snug. And that compartmentalizes the buckshot. Then for the final compartmentalization, as before, we're going to make a loop, and then we loop the loop. Then we flip the loop over, we come down to the cartridge, and we pull it nice and tight. And that gives us 2 half hitches for the finishing of the cartridge. And then we can cut the cord. And now we have a buck and ball cartridge with the Buckshot triad compartmentalized from the round ball, which is compartmentalized from the powder chamber. We'll withdraw the mandrel. And as before, for percussion arms, it's 110 grains. And for flintlock arms, it's 130 grains. To finish the cartridge, we pinch the body of the cartridge until we find the level of the gunpowder, crease the tail, fold the tail over, fold the tail in on itself, crease them, come across the top of the cartridge, and back down. Your tail is necessarily going to be a little bit shorter than with the round ball because there's more bullets. You've got an extra layer of ammunition in there. You've got an extra layer of the buckshot in the bottom. So that is a 69 caliber buck and ball United States cartridge. To make the 69 caliber Buckshot cartridge, we're going to use our Buckshot template and piece of paper. The Buckshot is a little bit bigger than the round ball and buck and ball, simply because the Buckshot takes up more length of the cartridge than the other 2 variants do. So as before, we're going to position our mandrel so that it's about a ½ inch from the end of the long edge of the trapezoid, and we're going to wind it up. Then, as before, we're going to use our choking cord and choke the end of the cartridge tube. Get our little flower. And then we're going to wrap one time around the end, pull it nice and tight, and secure with 2 half hitches. Then we cut the free end, but as before, we leave it attached to our spool. At this point, we're going to get 12 buckshot, 0.3 inches in diameter, or this is 0.31. So there we have 12 buckshot. And we're just going to roll them down the tube and let them settle. Generally, they will form themselves into nice little triads in 4 rows. And then we're going to put our mandrel back in place. And then the next step is to compartmentalize the triads of buckshot. So for the first row, you'll make a loop, and we'll come down to where the buckshot ought to be. Pull that snug, and we'll make another loop, and we'll come down to where the next row of buckshot ought to be. Compartmentalize them, and we'll come down to where the next row of buckshot ought to be, and compartmentalize them. And then to finish the cartridge, you'll make a loop, loop the loop, and then come all the way down to the end of the mandrel to where the last row of buckshot will be, and pull that nice and tight. Now we can cut the string, and now we have a 69 caliber US cartridge of buckshot. So the next step is to remove the mandrel and charge as before. And as before, flintlock muskets would use 130 grains of powder, and percussion would use 110 grains of musket powder. And again, the reason is the flintlock requires more powder for priming. So to finish the cartridge, We're going to pinch the body until we find the level of the gunpowder. Crease the edges, the sides of the tail. Fold the tail over like so. Fold the sides of the tail in towards the center and crease them with your finger, and then fold back across the top of the cartridge, down the side of the cartridge, and give it a pinch. So that is a US 69 caliber buckshot cartridge. So with that, we have demonstrated how to make the 3 styles of United States 69 caliber smoothbore ammunition that was in use from, essentially the Revolutionary War period up until, through the Civil War. So that's a round ball, buck and ball, and a buckshot cartridge.